Hey y'all, grown black folks talk. Tory Lanez gets sentenced to 10 years, or when the third longest con meets with mass delusion. Because there's not a whole lot to say in terms of the facts, but if you really want to break down of how we got to the third longest con and the mass delusion that followed, and how it is the state of California does not give two dead flies about either one when black people engage in it. If you want to watch this slow motion process reach its end, I'm going to put three videos in the description. Pam Esquire, the law intellect, went to Riverside, California, in order to see the sentencing and covered it. So we have a black woman on the ground. And this is a lawyer who follows the documents and the testimony. She's not involved in all the silly fighting back and forth going on between men and women that plays into the Tory Lanez case and into the mass delusion that we're going to talk about. She broke down what was going to happen in terms of day by day. There's a particular video where you had character witnesses giving testimony and people also sending in statements, including Megan Thee Stallion herself. There's a whole video, and I remember when I saw this video yesterday, knowing that he was going to be sentenced today, I'm like, they're going to throw the entire book at him. And the reason that they're going to throw the entire book at him is because of a regular delusion that black men have been playing with themselves for about 60 years, and then the third longest con in history. And Tory Lanez fell for both lock, stock, and barrel. Gentlemen, and also women too. I mean, just because we get these Goldman Sachs dollars, this also applies to us. You know, to go back to Carly Russell for a second, you don't even know the name of Sherry Papini, even though she's serving 18 months in prison for doing essentially the same thing and worse than Carly Russell did. She'll serve her prison time and go on with her life. Carly Russell will probably have this follow her around for the rest of her life. Sherry is white. You know, it is very sad when black men think that they can get away with the same stuff that white men do and not have consequences, and to make arguments about, well, white men are able to do this and that with their women, why can't we? No, you're not even allowed to do these things with your own women in public. No, because there's always going to be a system in place that has a plan for your black life, which has to do with the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment, when it said that felony imprisonment is the way that you can go back to a status of a slave, was written by people who did not believe black folks deserved to be more than that. It just so happened that the Civil War decided the issue. And that Abraham Lincoln, who also would not have freed the slaves and said as much, realized he could not win his war without us. But he left the framework in place in the 13th Amendment for black people to be re-enslaved. If you don't understand that, get the documentary 13. So there is a bounty on your head as a black man that's not on a white man's head. There is a 158-year-old plan that puts you back in prison. So when you get out here and try to do stupid stuff that you think white men have gotten away with, Thomas Jefferson, being the author of the Declaration of Independence, could abuse Sally Hemings for 36 years and still be held in honor for another 250. George Washington can be the father of his country, and no one would say for about the same amount of time that he was as bad as Joseph Mengele, plucking teeth out of the mouth of his slaves to give himself a new set of false teeth without anesthetic. Yeah, that's what George Washington did. Those set of teeth are now on display. Now we can talk about it. But see, you're not gonna get 250 years lead time for doing something stupid when you're a black man. That's just not how that works. Stop expecting it, stop asking for it, stop whining. That's a delusion. That's a con black men are paying on themselves. When you do it to yourself, you delude yourself. I'm going to come back to this concept of mass delusion in just a moment, but I also need to talk about the third longest con in history. It did not work in the long run for George Washington. It did not work in the long run for Thomas Jefferson, and it did not work for Cain all the way back in Genesis 4. I talked to you all about the longest con in history. The longest con in history is reject someone who put standards in place because of their love for you and act like you can do whatever you want to do and get a shortcut and still have your way at the same time. Mess around and find out. Adam and Eve edition. But the second longest con was done by Cain. And we know that Satan was the one that put it in the head of Cain as much as he slithered up on Eve, because the Lord came to Cain and told him, sin desires to have you. Between Genesis 3 and Genesis 4, the Lord had instituted a system that allowed Adam and Eve and their family to show their faith toward the coming Messiah, the seed of the woman who would come and be the redeemer of mankind. Abel never seemed to have questioned this and just did what he was told to do. Cain decided, I'm going to bring something that I want to bring and make this transactional. The second longest con on the right hand side is I can buy my way into something that only comes from a relationship of love. But the other part of that is Cain did this also. And then when I get punished for doing things the way that's not supposed to be done, I can beg my way out. Tory Lanez did both. Sitting up here talking about all the good that he was doing for his family, his community, his character witnesses came along and did all that and talked about all the good that he did, as if he can buy his way back into the good graces of society after having shot a woman. He's fortunate he didn't kill her. You look at the history of wars and you see how many people died from being shot in the foot and in the leg because they bled out. The Civil War was won by the Union partially because that happened. That's too long a story for y'all right now. The Civil War was also came out the way it did because the Confederate general who was surrender just barely survived to live that long after having gotten shot in the foot. No blood transfusion, no nothing. Lee was just as tough as nails. Undiagnosed heart disease and made it all the way to 63 anyway. Just tough as nails. But that just shows you grown men, strong men, have died of lower injuries of this type because you can bleed to death. So Tory Lanez thought that because he was doing a whole bunch of stuff in the community, that he was going to be able to bring his works. Because, Thomas Jefferson is able to bring his works. No one's going to talk about his crimes against humanity, right? George Washington is able to bring his works. Nobody talks about his crime against humanity. Nobody talks about how they should be sitting up here. They could be tried in absentia at The Hague for crimes against humanity because Black women are human. So I ought to be able to pull that too. Well, George Washington is no longer held in the esteem that he used to be held in. People talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thomas Jefferson is no longer held in the esteem he's held in. People talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. Their legacy has been complicated. Their names are taken off of things. My mother went to high school with one of their names on it. Washington and Lee University is now W&L because they cannot deal with those two men openly. Streets and statues have been removed because it does not even work for them. It just took a little longer because white privilege is a thing. Tory Lanez did not have any white privilege. And that's the short-term delusion that Black people are in, that we can do what white people can do and get away with it. Under the law, nobody should get away with it. But there's no reason for you to be delusional in 2023. But the second longest con in history is that you can buy your way into right standing and that you can beg your way out of punishment. Tory Lanez sitting here talking about having his baby mama come in and talk about, well, I should say the mother of his children, not use the language that has been used online. The mother of his child is talking about what a father he is and how his child is not adjusting well to him not being at home. When Tory Lanez gets out of prison, his son will be 16. And one of the things that we're supposed to remember about Tory Lanez that he is emotionally disturbed and mentally disturbed because he lost his mother at a young age and just now realized that, if he gets convicted of shooting a woman in the foot, his son will have to go without him. Just now have all these people come up and realize. But, Pam Esquire asked something really important. When do we start thinking about the goodness of our kids? You should have got the message when you beat up August Alsina that this was going to cost you your life as a father with your child. You didn't figure it out. She was right. But here's the deal. The judge came back and said, now, wait a minute. You want me to believe that he is intentionally doing all this good in the community. But at the same time, he has alcohol disorder and he has PTSD and he shouldn't be held accountable for his actions. You have one doctor coming in here talking about he does not have PTSD and another doctor coming in here talking about he does. Now, who do you want me to believe? Tory Lanez's defense team. I don't know, y'all. I don't know what happened there. But see, here's the thing. You believe the third longest con, the second longest con, the two aspects of the second longest con in history. This is what happened to you. And when you're a Black man, you cannot get away with it as long as white men can. It's just not going to work like that. So Tory Lanez is sitting up here doing 10 years in jail, in prison, because it doesn't work. Now let me go back to mass delusion. Of course, all these different people, black men and black women, are up here trying to rehash this verdict as if they can change it. All that they're going to be able to do is reinforce their mass delusion. It does not matter. I live in California. Understand this. If you get convicted of a crime out here, California doesn't care about your opinion. I felt as all these black people were coming around talking about black people that Tory Lanez was helping, California wants to gentrify such communities out of existence. I live in a community like that. That doesn't really help in California. California has need of convicts to go on the front lines and fight fires. And owing to the behavior of Vice President Kamala Harris, that does not even count as good. That does not always necessarily count as what you call good behavior to cut your sentence down. You just gonna be enslaved to go out there and do it. So Tory Lane's gonna be out there fighting the next set of California fires. Probably not because of the celebrity. They know they have to keep him out of general population type of things. But the point is, state of California doesn't care about helping black people like that. So that doesn't give you any merit in the state of California's eyes. But beyond that, the state of California has contracts with private prisons. That's another bed filled. Does not matter what we have to say about it. And so here's what people are doing. People are reinforcing their own delusions about black men being so necessary in the community. Do you know that none of these people in the courtroom and the prosecution and the judge both remarked on this according to Pam Esquire? Nobody talked about what had happened to Megan. Everybody did all this speaking up for Tory and never said anything about, okay, y'all have not said a word about the victim, about remorse for the victim. There's like she isn't even here. And his lawyer had the audacity, well, this isn't what this hearing is about. It's about that if it's about anything. So what a lot of people are doing at this very moment is reinforcing mass delusion. Um, that's all they can do. Do they have any power over the state of California? No. Do they have any power over Megan Thee Stallion? No. Can they pull territory lanes out of the grip of California for 10 years? No. All they can do is cling to their mass delusion and set themselves up to be next. The women to be abused and misused, and the men to get themselves into unrecoverable situations that they can neither buy nor beg their way out because the state has a target put on filling those prison beds. And it was decided, according to my law enforcement officer pastor, who was a parole officer, was at the meeting when the state of California made a bed for women like Tory Lanez when they were 9 years old. Of course, Tory Lanez was in Canada when he was 9 years old, and he'll be deported back there. So that even when he gets out, he's still not going to be able to stay in the life of his United States citizen born son. I could have called this the mess around and find out Tory Lane's delusional edition. But this man has a 6-year-old son and a mother who now has to recognize that this child who's already acting out because he doesn't have his father there has now got to be a single mother alone with this child. So dad's gonna be in prison, single mother got to do it alone, and another child is damaged because Tory Lanez did not think before he whipped out that gun to shoot Megan. And by the way, we can say that now because he has been convicted. There ain't no allegedly left. He did not think before that, I need to think about my son. How do you think Tory Lane's father? We know that his father, Sunstar Peterson, knew that it was about to get serious because he went back and apologized to the court for his behavior the last time. See, reality has had time to set in. Tory Lanez has already done. He actually got about 12 years, but he has been in prison long enough to serve out some of it, so it comes out to around 10, maybe 10 and a half. But he's getting some credit for time served. So it'll be about 10 more. So this is what happens when you let yourself get conned and you con yourself by engaging in mass delusion. Gentlemen, you're not white, you never will be. Everybody, doesn't matter what you do. Till you get things, till you confess your sins and get right on the things you need to get right on. Doesn't matter what begging you do, doesn't matter what other works you have. That thing is going to come and destroy you. period. This is, warning, shameless plug for Jesus Christ in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. This is the argument of Christianity in a nutshell, by the way, that no matter what begging you may think you're going to do at the final judgment, and no matter what works you think you're going to do to balance out your bad works, it's not going to work for you. That's why I say it's third longest. This is the second longest con in history. Unless you deal with that sin problem by believing on Jesus Christ, you're not gonna be able to make a transaction to get up out of the punishment of that, and you're not gonna be able to beg your way out either. There is a way available that love has made for you. Love, grace, and mercy have made a way for you. You can live your entire life doing this and that. I hear people all the time, well, I did this and I did that. God ought to let me into heaven. No, you will no more get into heaven than Tory Lanez will get out of this next 10 years. And in the court of God, there's no appeal. He's the final judge. Like I said, the second longest con in history. It is a relative of the first longest con that said, I can live the way I want, and what God requires me means, even though He created me, means nothing. I'm gonna do what I want to do and find a shortcut to get more than what He's offering me. That's Genesis 3. Tory Lanez got caught up on Genesis 4. Little jealous behind man let himself shoot that woman who's more successful than he is and more famous. And all he's gonna get for his trouble is a son that has to grow up without him, a father who has to be heartbroken, the mother of his children left in a bad situation, Rock Nation out here whining and crying powerlessly, and him in his 30s will be older than me before he sees the free light of day. He will come out a felon that will go on his record in the United States and in Canada. Here, he will never have more than the rights of a slave. I don't know what the Canadian Constitution says about such things, but it's probably not good. And he will carry that for the rest of his life. I wonder if he thought that bit about talking about Dan's Bee was going to be worth it. But see, that's what happens when you let yourself participate in mass delusion. When you let yourself get carried away, gentlemen, being carried away with women, more powerful men are not going to let you do that for their own reasons. They got prisons to fill. Y'all do not even understand what is going to come down the pike, as one of the very few industries that's left over is the private prison industry to keep people keeping people having their dividends. There is a publication called Lifetime Income Report. And on that back page, Corrections Institute of America, then it changed its name to Core Civic because people like me were getting upset about it. Was out there paying 8 to 20% dividends on people like Tory Lanez. Folks got paid today on Black slave body number, whatever number. He's gonna become a number, and that number is gonna generate other numbers. Was it? I just want to know. I want to just ask his whole family, since they had so much to say about his character. Was it worth all that, Tory? He has 10 years to think about it, and I'm not mentioning this to jump on him. As ever, I'm up here talking about the lessons for us. Please do not fall for the second longest con in history. You will not buy yourself into the right relationship, and you will not beg your way out of punishment when you louse it up. That's not how that works. Don't fall for it. And don't sit around in mass delusion like you're going to be able to speak something out of existence or into existence. Trial's over. That's done. Just like when Tesla said back in the time of Martin Luther, another version of this con, as soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs, same version, same con. Don't go for it. And if you're around people that are encouraging mass delusion, like all these people talking about Tory Lanez falsely convicted, they've changed. They've been saying it for how long? They can say it for the next 10 years. Tory Lanez gonna serve that time. Now he might be able to find, unless he can find a lawyer who can make a case that his last lawyer was so incompetent he should be retried. Now that's possible. But how much time? You know how long it takes to do an appeal? He's already done about a year. It'll be at least 2. So you would have already lost 3 years over some foolery that man didn't even have to do. Don't let it happen to y'all. Like I said in a long time ago, stay in your proper lane before you end up like Tory Lanez. Said that a long time ago, video a long time ago, close to the time that he was convicted. I want to see my people make it. I don't want to see black men not make it. I don't want to see black women not make it, because if we don't make it, the children aren't going to make it. they're going to end up being breeders or slaves. That's it. We're going to be reverted back. That's what's going to happen. That's what's already happening. Just have to actually pay attention to what the end of all this foolery is going to be. But I also recognize if people want to be cons, I mean, these are old cons, y'all, like Genesis 3, Genesis 4 kind of foolery. Like, haven't you had enough of being taken advantage by the world of flesh and the devil? You want to do same old things? The mass delusion is amazing to me. You're just going to end up re-enslaved. Tory Lanez got to do 10 years as a chattel of the state of California. If the mother of his children can't, if his child cannot do a good job, his son will become a ward. Either his grandfather has to take him, or his son will become a ward of the state. And because that child is going to be thoroughly messed up by all that's going on around him, there's a very good chance that he'll be in prison. Unless there's some very strong people who can come around that mother and that child now. And all the mass delusion around them is not going to help them. The mass delusion is not going to keep that child's heart warm at night when he has to think about his father being in prison. And everybody telling him it was unjust and unfair. That boy's going to grow up angry for two reasons. One, his father made a decision that caused his father to get put away. But secondly, all this delusion is just going to feed that anger. And when he doesn't, he's going to be angry about the truth that he does not know and angry because of the lies that he's being fed. And then when he has to be confronted with what actually happened, that's the setup that that little boy is in right now. All because Tory Lanez was not willing to let Megan Thee Stallion walk away from him and have agency. And that's my next video, but y'all see that tomorrow morning. I just found out who Kayla Nicole Jones is. And I realized that's a whole nother subject, but we'll get to that tomorrow. Please educate yourself about the second longest con and stop falling for it. And whatever you do, get away from people who are mass delusional. California doesn't care what you think about whoever they convict. I live here. State of California doesn't care. The whole another video to be done about stop worrying about what everybody else is doing and refocus your life. But not this video. Y'all have a good day now. Goodbye.